can you imagine eating at those hours? And I would be famished.
I feel really
Um,
old right now because I do eat at those hours.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hi, Rose. Welcome back.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
I can't wait
Well,
to talk food with you again because we've talked food in the past and we get to talk
yeah.
food a little bit again today.
Yay. Yes, I'm so excited.
So you are a fan of the Tudors, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
But you also love all kinds of royal history too, don't you?
I do.
I really want to talk today about tea time and understanding what tea time is. We're Americans, so not all of us have had the opportunity to experience a real tea time. But I think the question remains, why is there a tea time and where does that history come from? So today we're kind of dabble into that a little bit with Rose's vast knowledge on the subject. So Rose, are you ready?
Yes.
Let's start with the Tudors because that's the subject most people who come to the show are comfortable with. So give us an idea in Tudor times, any part of that 118 years that they reigned, what did their daily eating look like? Were there certain times that they ate? How much did they eat? What can you tell us?
Well, I guess it really depends on, well, of course, Henry VIII and people in court, they ate a lot, a vast amount. Um,
Especially Henry.
of course. Um, but yes, around 11:30, I believe that was the time that was the first meal around 11:30, and then again at 4. So their dinner would have been at 4. And I mean, can you imagine eating at those hours? And I would be famished.
I feel really
Um,
old right now because I do eat at those hours. Okay.
11:30 and 4.
Okay. Well, 11:30, yes, because I've always been like a 11 to noon lunch person. And then
Okay.
I get so hungry that by the time I get home from work, which is usually about 4 o'clock, sometimes we end up eating at 4:30. And our daughter is like, "How old are you guys?" So I guess we eat like the Tudors too.
Oh my goodness. So no snack in between? You don't have anything in between that?
I should, but I don't.
I would be so hungry. I'm not a faster, so
Okay, so I'm not a breakfast eater. Did the Tudors eat breakfast?
so at 11:30
That was their breakfast.
that was their breakfast, and they would mainly eat leftovers from the previous night. So cold meats and bread and things like that. So now, we what do we eat for breakfast? I mean, well, I would like to think it's, everybody eats like oatmeal and bacon and eggs and fruits and things like that. But nowadays, people just eat smoothies. They don't
Right.
they
We
drink,
drink breakfast now.
they drink breakfast. They drink smoothies.
So they ate the food from the night before, which, I mean, we're talking the 16th century here. So I'm not sure how good they were at keeping their food at proper temperatures. So
Oh,
did people get
yes.
sick all the time, or how did they store this? Do you know?
I can't imagine. I mean, I think nowadays there are just more germs and bacteria where we would get food poisoning if you left something out. But back then they did smoke a lot of meats and things like that. So and you're right, they didn't even have refrigerators, and ice boxes weren't even a thing.
Right.
So yeah, it's a little baffling, but
They had cellars, I assume, just like,
calories, right?
yeah, so they could keep
Something,
things cool.
keep cold. But
Yeah.
even now they say don't let your food get to room temperature because that's when it starts to grow bacteria. Maybe the Tudors just had better gut health than we do.
Yeah, maybe. I'm so okay. So I'm going to go back to this. They ate breakfast at 11:30 and
Right.
they called it breakfast.
Mhm.
So what did they call it at 4 p.m.?
That was supper.
It was supper. Okay. I like to figure out regionally. We all say things a little different. I grew up with breakfast, dinner, and supper as our three meals. What did you grow up with?
Just food. We didn't have we did I mean, you think about my parents are Korean, and it was my grandparents predominantly at home. So we really didn't have, we didn't have anyone calling us to the table saying, okay, everybody come have breakfast and, come have lunch or dinner. We actually didn't even have breakfast. Because my parents, they worked really hard and they couldn't get up to make us breakfast. I know that sounds really sad, but and then lunch was at school, and then dinner was just it's just food on the table.
All right. So you did call it lunch and then dinner. So we've discovered that the Tudors ate at 11:30 and 4 p.m. like me.
Right. Like you're such a tutor.
You're such a tutor. I'm just an old lady. That's really all it is. So we know when they ate. How about as we move through the centuries, how does that time change? Do they still eat around the same times?
No, I mean that it just jumped times from just throughout the years, but later on with the invention of electricity and railroads and new jobs and industries, meal times were early in the morning and then late at night when they arrived home. So from work. So breakfast was around 7:30 and then or 8, aristocrats sometimes around 9, and then dinner was at 8 or 9 p.m. So it was very, very late.
I couldn't handle that.
No. So thank goodness for Anna Marie Russell, the seventh Duchess of Bedford.
I was just going to say, who's that?
Yes, she she is the one that's credited for really inventing afternoon tea.
Okay.
And
yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, because here we are now, we're smack dab in the Victorian era, and the eating schedule has changed and people are hungry. What does she do? I feel like I'm just telling everybody what she did.
Well, she was a lady's maid to Queen Victoria, of the bedchamber. So she was very, very close to Queen Victoria. Afternoon tea started by happenstance. So the seventh Duchess of Bedford, Anna Russell, she requested light snacks such as bread with butter and biscuits and a pot of tea to be sent to her room, because she just had this she was just sort of lightheaded and had the sinking feeling, and she was feeling peckish.
She was hungry. That's the feeling.
Yeah. Exactly. So and good for her, right? For speaking her mind. So soon she invited friends to join her, and one of them happened to be, again, her lifelong friend, Queen Victoria, who loved the idea and began having tea parties herself. So what was supposed to be a light snack became a regular meal for upper class ladies, and it really did start for practical reasons and eventually evolved into this quintessentially British tradition and ritual.
It really makes you wonder if the women of the Victorian era who were around when tea time was created by this Duchess, if they all thought, oh, thank goodness, finally somebody spoke up and we get to eat something.
I am sure, I'm certain, but also you have to wonder, there probably were other people doing this, just not as elaborate as they were doing, but some, people were eating and throughout the day, I'm sure, but just she got the credit for it because she has this platform and she's well known, and Queen Victoria. So if just anybody on the streets were doing this, they wouldn't really be known as the person that created afternoon tea.
Right. Not quite as memorable if it's Susie down the street.
Right. Susie down the street.
The seamstress. I don't know. You're right. She had the platform to be able to do this. And I think it's so interesting, too, because Tell me again, what foods did she bring to her first one?
Very simple. So it started with, just bread and butter and so the upper class served tea and biscuits to their guests as far back as the 1700s. But in the late 1800s, when the Duchess of Bedford made this a tradition, she started with some biscuits and bread, and then it became a more elaborate affair.
I'm sorry, when you say biscuits, do you really mean cookies?
Yes.
I just want to make that clear in case somebody who's listening doesn't know and they're
Not
like,
Southern
ew.
biscuits. No, not.
Right. What kind of cookies did they make back then?
Shortbread was a
Ooh,
big one. So shortbread, biscuits, very simple, very plain, and some bread and butter. And yeah, thank goodness for finger sandwiches. And,
interesting.
because it became a more elaborate fare with finger sandwiches, scones with clotted cream and jam, and pastries and mini cakes.
I
Of
feel
course,
like
all
the central theme around what they are eating is butter.
butter.
It is. I mean, shortbread, right? That's got a lot of butter in it.
Mhm.
You got the clotted cream, maybe some toast and butter. I mean, do you see it now? Like the butter.
Butter. Lots of butter. And finger sandwiches surely would have had butter in it.
Yeah.
Cucumber sandwiches and jam. I don't think jam pennies were really a thing until Queen Elizabeth II. But yes, you're right. Pastries and mini cakes, they all have butter.
And I suppose that's just because that was an ingredient that was readily
Yeah,
available.
readily available.
Right.
And
So
delicious, of course.
exactly. And there's so many different ways that you can have it.
Right.
So the Victorian era, they had these delicious little sandwiches and cookies or biscuits and so many other things to choose from. How does that differ from what is now the quintessential British tea time food that's eaten?
So, well, when I can't speak for everyone else, but when I serve tea or when I have tea parties or have people over for tea, I still do the traditional finger sandwiches, scones with clotted cream and jam, and mini cakes and pastries. So, the order of which it's meant to be eaten is from the bottom up, so savory to sweet. So the finger sandwiches will be on the bottom, and then the scones and clotted cream and jam are in the middle tier, and then the top tier would have all of the mini cakes and pastries. And I always make cucumber cream cheese sandwiches because I think they're so refreshing, and they're just there's I put lemon and dill in it, and it is very, very good. And then of course the scones with the clotted cream and jam. And but back then, have you heard of Victoria sandwiches and Victoria sponge cakes?
I guess I've heard the term Victoria sponge cakes, but I guess I don't know any details about either of those things.
So Queen Victoria, when she began having tea parties herself and inviting friends, she would have her tea with Victoria sponge cake, or Victoria sandwiches, which are they're really just butter cakes, and sandwiched in the middle was raspberry jam, and on top just some powdered sugar on top. So very simple, but it's very good.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah. And so she would have that with her tea. And right nowadays, I mean, you go to Ritz, I guess if you go to Ritz-Carlton or a tea shop or a tea, um,
Room?
what do we call it? Sorry, tea room. It's late. Um, what do they serve? They serve finger sandwiches and scones and not English. So I find in the States you can't really find English scones. They're scones, but they're American scones, which are very different than English scones.
Tell us, how are they different?
I'm not disparaging American scones because they're amazing, but American scones are more that they're dense and there's a sugar glaze on top. have you seen, I mean, when you go to Starbucks or when you go
Hmm.
to any tea rooms, they're triangular and they're just sort of glazed with sugar. Um, and they're flat and you eat it, I guess, on its own.
Or
But with
dunk it.
English, mhm. But with English scones, they're tall and they're round and they're fluffy in the middle, and you break them in half, and they're meant to be eaten with clotted cream and jam. So they're not as sweet.
Mm. I'm drooling over here. We're talking about so much food. I'm ready for my second supper. So the English or the British scones look more like an American biscuit, is probably the closest I could say.
Probably, yes, the closest, but taller.
Yes, and smaller.
Smaller, yes, tea scones. So smaller but taller.
And so do scones come in different flavors, or what's the traditional British way to eat them?
Oh, traditional is plain. And you know, if you want to get fancy, then some currants in there.
Mm.
But that's really the extent of it. I mean, that's all you really need is just plain and, and fruit scones,
And they
they
don't
call it.
taste like a biscuit. They have a sweetness to them.
No, so biscuits, like the Southern biscuits, they're savory
Hmm.
and they're meant to be eaten with savory foods, such as, like I mean with dinner, with gravy and things like
Right.
that. And it's and they're salty, but with these English scones, they have a hint of sweetness. Um, and again, they have toppings, so jam and clotted cream, which really enhances everything. It's perfect on English scones with jam.
It is perfect. So let's talk about your love for tea time and how you were able to transfer that into a business.
Well, I never actually intended to convert this love of tea time into a business. It wasn't until I realized through other people, meaning like guests and such, what they were saying about how you couldn't get this type of scone here in the States. As we were talking about earlier, the American scones are very sweet. And if you have a sweet tooth and if that's, what you're looking for, that's great. I love American scones too, but it's just very different than English scones. So I wanted to be able to share this different type of scone here with the nation and just provide something not so sweet.
What's the name of your company?
Company is called Mrs. Bakewell's. We are the first and only cream tea company in the United States.
Let's talk about the products that you offer as well. So, if you're listening and you're interested in trying a quintessential British scone with some tea, you want to listen to what Rose has to say right now because I also have some feedback for afterward. But
Oh,
what can somebody expect to get?
our cream tea boxes, our curated cream tea boxes, are filled with classic English scones, so freshly baked English scones. They're traditional, authentic English scones, and also a jar of strawberry preserves from France, and also clotted cream, which is imported from England, some Twinings tea, which is approved by the royal family, and some mini wooden bamboo spoons to help you get your toppings onto your scones.
And what different flavors of scones do you make?
So we have classic plain, cranberry orange, blueberry lemon, and Zante currants.
Mm. And I have been lucky enough to receive one of these packages from Rose, and I was able to try them out. And I have to tell you, I think the cranberry orange is my favorite. I mean, I really like the blueberry lemon, But the cranberry orange, there's something about it. It's just so good.
That is a very popular one, but surprisingly, blueberry lemon and classic plain are the most popular flavors.
Really?
Yes.
I wonder if just cranberries scares people away.
I'm not sure if people associate cranberry orange with a seasonal flavor,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was actually really pleasantly surprised that classic plain was one of the number one flavors, or that's just what people like.
And it makes me wonder if that's what they order because they want that traditional experience.
I think so too. I think so too. But the Zante currants are pretty amazing as well. They are mighty in flavor. They really have just this really, they have this tang to it because they're grapes. They're not currants. They're called Zante currants, but they're actually black currant grapes. So if you can imagine little mini raisins.
I'm daydreaming about it right now as you're describing
I'm gonna have
it.
to send you a box.
Okay, yes, please. I love the combinations that you have. And I am not a big dessert person, so that might explain why I've only had tiramisu like once. But I don't like overly sweet stuff. I'm just like your family. It's not appealing to me. I am more of a savory person. And so these scones are just perfect. If you just want something that's just a little bit sweet, but it's filling enough because it's a scone.
You can control the sweetness as well because depending on how much jam you put on there, because the jam will make it very sweet.
Yes. We talked about how I forget what her name was, Duchess Sarah.
Oh, Anna Marie Russell, the seventh Duchess of Bedford.
Where did I get Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Duchess of Bedford is the one who, let's say, popularized tea time. Would that be fair?
Yes. And Queen Victoria, of course.
Of course, we have to give her credit as well. It kind of reminds me earlier this season, we talked about Catherine of Braganza and how she popularized tea. She didn't bring it to England, but she made it popular. So there's a fun little connection there between the popularization of tea and this tea time and how they're centuries apart still.
Yes, so she was the wife of Charles II, and she brought tea as part of her dowry. And she was so ill on her journey over. She was so seasick, and she requested some tea. And yes, that was tea became very popular.
And before that, they drank coffee.
Yes,
So
coffee, beer, ale,
right.
wine.
I think it's so easy to forget, as anyone who studies history, that coffee was there first. Such an American thing. We think coffee is so American.
We do, don't we? Yeah, we do.
Right, that's our thing. Look at all the Starbucks we have. And I am a coffee drinker. I try to drink tea. I will try every kind of tea. I have a tea drawer full of different flavors.
But you reach for the coffee in the end.
I do. And I don't know if that's just because what I've always had was coffee and I'm just used to the flavor of it, that when I have tea, it feels too thin to me. That's the only way I can describe it. Do you know what I mean?
Have you ever had it with milk or sugar?
I have, yep, or honey.
Well, I mean, you think about it, beer and coffee were the alternatives, right? I mean, that's why tea really was an American thing because, like I said before, the colonies wanted no part of English customs and it was just so heavily taxed. But I like my tea. I don't use tea bags a lot. I will use tea bags, but my favorite way of having tea is loose leaf. Have you had loose leaf before?
I have not, but I do want to try it.
So Fortnum and Masons have the best loose leaf tea, and they're in London, of course. So, but you can order online. The loose leaf tea is so much stronger and the flavor profile is much more rich.
Oh,
So that's where you do sometimes need that milk to counteract that strong flavor. And so maybe if you try loose leaf, it'll change your mind.
I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
Tea bags are the bottom of the it's like the sort of like the what do you call it? I mean, there's an ongoing joke that it's sort of like the dust from the bottom of the
So my tea drawer full of tea bags is the bottom rung. I gotcha. That's cool. It's like if you drink the cheap coffee, there's a difference between cheap coffee and quality coffee.
Yes, there is. Yes.
Well, good to know. I need to switch to loose leaf. If you're listening to this and you're like, what are they talking about right now? I'm really sorry. Sometimes I'm interested in things that maybe you wouldn't think I'm interested in, or you wouldn't necessarily consider it to be a topic for one of my podcasts. But there's something to it when we learn these little bits of history that kind of builds a picture. I mean, if you're a fiction writer, you want to understand how these things looked or what experiences people may have had.
Yes, history is so important. And I mean, we wouldn't be here if we didn't have this knowledge, of just people continuously talking about history. And just circling back real quick to the loose leaf, Rebecca, if you do get loose leaf, make sure you get a tea strainer. You don't want knowing. I don't want you to be choking on the tea leaves.
Well, maybe I would just turn into a tea leaf reader instead.
Because I don't know if they'll settle fast enough. So I just wanted to mention that real quick before I forget.
No, that's good. I was thinking like, oh, I need to get a whole new kind of teapot and I need to get the right stuff. And
oh no, tea strainers come in handy.
perfect. That's definitely what I'm going to need to get. Okay, so as listeners of the show, Rose has been kind enough to give us a promo code so that if you would like to try this quintessential British experience, you can at a discounted rate. And so
Yes.
if you're listening right now and you would like to try Rose's Mrs. Bakewell's scones, where can they find you, Rose?
So our cream tea boxes are sold exclusively on our website at mrsbakewells.com.
And we're going to offer you what kind of discount?
10% discount.
Ooh, okay, so
Weird.
10% off, and you'll have to use the promo code Tudors to get that. And I'll put this in the show notes as well. If you're listening and you don't have time to write it down, in the show notes, you'll find the promo code to get a discount on Rose's delicious cream tea scones. I cannot tell you enough how delicious these are. I went to work today and that's all I was talking about again. And Rose's presentation, when the box arrives, I'm going to do a video of me opening this box so that you can experience how well this is put together, because even the box has her branding on it. You open it up and there's like beautiful, cards in there, and there's tissue paper with a sticker of Mrs. Bakewell's, and you open it up and it's like the angels sing, oh! And there are the scones all beautifully packaged, and the clotted cream and the preserve all sitting in this box, and they're just waiting for you to eat them. And the worst part is waiting for your oven to preheat because you want to put them in your mouth so fast. They are so delicious. I've never had a British scone. I've had an American scone, was not a fan. But these are so good, you guys. If you've never had one, I really recommend you just try it. Get some friends together even. Try it together. Just have a fun experience. Make some tea, sit around, gossip a little bit, and eat some of these scones. You'll thank me. I think you will.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you to say. And yes, patience is key. Once you preheat the scone, or once you preheat the oven, that's once it's done preheating, that's when you want to pop the scones in because you don't want the scones to be in there as the oven is preheating because then it'll just dry them out.
You don't want that because they are so good. Like when they come out of the oven, they're just like the perfect temperature, and you grab it and you can so easily pull it apart into two pieces. And then you can decide at that point, are you a heathen and do you like, that's my word for the today. Have you noticed that? Are you a heathen and you like to put the clotted cream down first?
Oh, no.
Or are you like,
Evan, please don't hear. Please don't listen to that.
I want to know, how do you eat your scone? Okay, so if you're listening to this, reach out to me on social media at Tudors Dynasty, wherever you are on social media. I'm there as at Tudors Dynasty. Tell me how you eat your scone. I want to know, clotted cream first or preserve first? Which is it?
And we do try to do our part in making sure our packaging is sustainable, eco-friendly, and that's why when you open the box, everything is just customized to fit perfectly in there, so there's no waste. And we don't like to use foam and bubble wrap and things like that. So that's why when you open the box, everything is just it's just all perfectly packaged in there.
It's one.
I actually, if you do make an unboxing video, Rebecca, there's a little note that I wrote on there on the tissue paper. So it may not be the best, but I wrote "Sorry, Rebecca" on there.
So, okay. Well, then we have backstory. So if I open it and the listeners see the video, now they'll laugh and they'll understand. You're not sorry about the contents. Well, let's get that clear. I can't wait to open it now. But it's serious. The packaging is so amazing. I don't want to keep just gushing over your packaging, but it is unbelievably just beautiful. And the bag that it comes in is reusable. Like you could use it as a lunch bag if you wanted to.
Yes, I get a lot of emails. People are using them as lunch bags, and it's so nice to hear. And especially if they're sending it as a gift, because it's such a pleasant surprise for the recipient. But if people who want to reorder, we're actually going to be carrying disposable bags as well. If you don't want 10 cooler bags.
If you really don't have a need for that many bags.
That many, right. We have recyclable, disposable bags.
Oh, fantastic.
Keep the contents cool.
Rose Bakewell, thank you so much for coming on the show today and chatting tea time with us.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to be here.
And that concludes this episode on Tea Time with Rose Bakewell. I'd like to give a big shout out to all of our new patrons in the month of January. Lisa H., Donna K., Amy P., and Jacqueline N. I'd also like to say thank you to Patricia H., Jody, and Teresa L. for increasing your pledges. Thank you so much, you guys, for your generosity. It's because of patrons like you that this show continues. If you'd like to become a patron, check out all the links in the show notes. You'll find it there. And you're also going to find a special link to a patron-exclusive discount on Mrs. Bakewell's. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Larson.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Tudors Dynasty Podcast. You can follow and support the Tudors Dynasty Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon @Tudors Dynasty.